The air smelled wrong, like wet earth and something rotting beneath it. And in the silence of those ancient woods, I heard breathing. Slow, deliberate, not mine. I turned, and there, crouched between the trees, watching me with eyes that had forgotten what it meant to be human, was something that should not exist. Few people know what really lives in the deepest parts of the Appalachian Mountains. The parts where trails don't go, where the mist hangs so thick you can't see 10 feet ahead, where the forest itself feels alive, watching, waiting. These mountains have stood for over 300 million years. And in that time, they've learned to keep secrets, dark secrets, about people who went into the wilderness and never came back. Not really. People who survived, adapted, and became something else entirely. These are 6 true encounters with feral people in the Appalachian Mountains. Real testimonies, documented disappearances, and survivors who will never be the same. Before we venture into the darkness, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because here at Chills from Reality, every story leaves a mark, and this one might follow you home. The first encounter happened in the fall of 2017. A man named Marcus Webb was hiking alone through the Great Smoky Mountains. He was an experienced outdoorsman, former military. He knew how to handle himself in the wilderness, but nothing could have prepared him for what he found that October afternoon. Marcus had been hiking off trail for about 6 hours, deep into the backcountry, the kind of place where you can walk for days and never see another person. He stopped to rest near a small creek, ate some trail mix, drank some water. That's when he noticed it. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just an oppressive, suffocating quiet. He looked up, scanned the tree line, and that's when he saw it. A figure standing behind a massive oak tree, partially hidden, but watching him. Marcus called out, asked if they needed help. No response. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, staring. Marcus stood up, started walking toward the tree, and that's when the figure moved. It didn't walk. It didn't run. It scrambled on all fours like an animal, disappearing deeper into the forest. Marcus froze, his heart pounding, because what he'd seen in that brief moment wasn't right. The figure was humanoid, but wrong. Pale skin covered in dirt and grime, long matted hair, and the way it moved, too fluid, too fast, not human. He decided to head back, follow his GPS to the main trail, but as he walked, he heard it. Footsteps behind him, matching his pace. He'd stop, the footsteps would stop, he'd walk, they'd start again, always staying just out of sight, just beyond the trees. Marcus picked up his pace, started jogging. The footsteps did too. Faster now, closer. He ran. Branches whipped his face. Roots tried to trip him, and behind him, the sound of pursuit. Not boots on dirt, bare feet slapping against the wet ground, and breathing, heavy, ragged, animal-like. Marcus didn't look back. He just ran, his lungs burning, his legs screaming, until finally he burst through the tree line onto the main trail. A group of hikers stared at him, asked if he was okay. He turned back toward the forest. The footsteps had stopped. Everything was silent again. Marcus reported it to the park rangers. They took his statement, asked detailed questions. The ranger taking his report seemed unsurprised, almost resigned, like he'd heard this before. Marcus asked if there had been other sightings. The ranger hesitated, then admitted yes, many others, over decades. Same area, same description, but they never found anything. No evidence, no tracks, just stories. The ranger told Marcus something that still haunts him. He said the old-timers who grew up in these mountains have a name for them. They call them the Wild Ones. People who disappeared into the wilderness generations ago, some by choice, some by circumstance. And they never came back. They survived out there, had children, raised them without civilization, without language, without humanity. And now, decades later, there are entire communities of them, hidden in the deepest hollows, living like animals, hunting, scavenging, watching. Marcus never went back to those mountains. But sometimes, late at night, he still hears it. The sound of bare feet on dirt, getting closer, closer. And he wakes up in a cold sweat, wondering if one day they might find him. Would you have run? Or would you have stayed to see what it was? Tell me in the comments below. The second encounter is even more disturbing, because it involved a family. People who thought they were safe, protected by numbers. But in the Appalachian wilderness, numbers don't always matter. Summer of 2019. The Harlow family decided to go camping in the Cherokee National Forest. David and Jennifer Harlow and their 2 children, Emma, 8 years old, and Tyler, 11. They'd been planning the trip for months, bought new camping gear, studied maps, chose a spot near a stream a few miles from the main campground, far enough to feel isolated, close enough to feel safe. The first 2 days were perfect. They hiked during the day, fished in the stream, roasted marshmallows at night. The kids were having the time of their lives. But on the 3rd night, everything changed. Emma woke up around 2 in the morning. She heard something outside the tent, a scratching sound, like fingernails dragging slowly across the canvas. She whispered to her brother. He told her it was probably just a raccoon. But the scratching didn't stop. It moved, circling the tent, slow, deliberate. Then it stopped right at the entrance. David woke up. He grabbed his flashlight and unzipped the tent flap, shined the beam into the darkness. Nothing, just trees and shadows. But as he was about to close the tent, he saw it, a handprint on the outside of the tent, small, like a child's hand. But the fingers were too long, the nails caked with dirt and something darker. He stepped outside, scanned the area with his flashlight. That's when he smelled it, a rancid odor, like decay and unwashed bodies. It made his stomach turn. Then he heard it, a voice, high-pitched, coming from the trees, a child's voice, crying, calling out, "Help me, please, help me." David's blood went cold because they were miles from anyone. There shouldn't be another child out here. He called out, asked where they were. The voice responded, "I'm lost, I'm scared. Please help me." But something about it was wrong. The inflection, the tone. It sounded rehearsed, mimicked, like something trying to sound human but not quite getting it right. Jennifer grabbed his arm, pulled him back into the tent. They zipped it shut, held their children, and listened. The voice kept calling, moving around their campsite, sometimes close, sometimes far. "Mommy, Daddy, help me." And then it changed. The voice became Emma's voice. Exactly Emma's voice. "Mommy, I'm scared. Why won't you help me?" Jennifer covered Emma's mouth, tears streaming down her face because Emma was right there in her arms. So what was outside? The thing circled their tent for hours, scratching, pushing against the walls, calling in Emma's voice, until finally, just before dawn, it stopped. Silence. David waited 20 minutes, then carefully unzipped the tent, looked outside. Nothing. They packed up in record time, left their camping chairs, their cooler, everything they couldn't immediately carry, and drove straight home. Didn't stop until they were 3 states away. They reported it to the rangers. A team went to investigate. They found the campsite. The tent was shredded, long claw marks gouged into the fabric, and surrounding the site, dozens of footprints. Small, barefoot, human-shaped but wrong. The toes too long, the arch too high, like feet that had never worn shoes, that had adapted to gripping rocks and trees. The rangers followed the tracks for over 2 miles, deep into the forest, until they reached a clearing, and the tracks just stopped. No explanation. They just ended, as if whatever made them had simply vanished. But in the center of the clearing, they found something else. A pile of objects. Personal belongings, a watch, a bracelet, a pair of glasses, a child's stuffed animal, items that didn't belong there, items that had been collected, arranged carefully, almost reverently. One of the rangers recognized the watch. It belonged to a hiker who'd gone missing in 2015. They'd searched for weeks, never found a trace. The Harlow family never spoke about it publicly. They moved to a different state, but Emma started having nightmares. She'd wake up screaming, saying she could hear her own voice calling from the woods, calling her outside, calling her home. Her parents took her to therapists, put her on medication. Nothing helped. One day, she drew a picture in school, a figure standing in the trees, pale, thin, with long arms and hollow eyes. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, she wrote 3 words. "It looks like me." The school counselor called her parents, suggested intensive therapy. But Emma refused to talk about it. She just kept drawing the same figure over and over, always watching, always waiting. And in every drawing, the figure got a little closer. Do you think it was trying to lure them out? Or was it trying to replace Emma? Take her place? Become her? The truth is, we'll never know. But somewhere in those mountains, something still walks around at night, calling in the voices of children. And if you hear it, don't answer, because it's not a child. It never was. The third encounter comes from late 2020, 4 college students on a hiking trip. They were documenting everything for a YouTube channel, trying to build an audience, get some views. They had no idea they were about to capture something that would get their footage confiscated and their channel shut down. The group consisted of Derek, Madison, Cole, and Jenna, all experienced hikers. They'd been planning this trip through the Pisgah National Forest for months. They had cameras, drones, professional equipment. On the second day, they decided to go off-trail, explore some of the deeper, less-traveled areas. That's when they found it. An old structure, half collapsed, surrounded by overgrown vegetation. It looked like an old hunting cabin, abandoned for decades. Derek wanted to film inside, get some atmospheric shots. The others agreed. They pushed open the door. It creaked on rusted hinges. Inside was dark, damp. The floor was rotted in places. Holes in the roof let in streams of pale sunlight. There was old furniture, a broken table, rusted cans, and carvings on the walls, names, dates, some going back to the 1960s. Madison was filming everything, narrating for their channel. Then Cole noticed something in the corner. A pile of bones, small ones. They assumed animal bones at first. Deer, maybe raccoon. But then Cole picked up a skull, turned it over. Human teeth, a human jaw, but small, child-sized. They dropped it, backed away. That's when they heard movement above them, in the rafters. All four of them looked up, and there it was, a figure, crouched on a beam, completely naked, skin pale and filthy, hair long and matted. It was staring at them with wide, unblinking eyes. Not moving, not breathing, just watching. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. They just stared at each other. Then Jenna screamed, and they ran. The camera kept rolling, shaking violently. You can hear their panicked breathing, branches breaking, and behind them, other sounds. Footsteps, multiple sets, fast, getting closer. Madison was crying, begging them to run faster. Derek was shouting directions, trying to navigate back to the trail. And all the while, the sounds behind them grew louder, closer, like they were being herded, chased. They burst out onto the main trail, collapsed, gasping for air. Cole looked back. Nothing, just trees. Silence. They packed up their camp in minutes, drove straight to the ranger station, showed them the footage. The rangers watched in complete silence. Then, without explanation, they confiscated the memory card, said it was evidence, told the students not to talk about what they'd seen, not to post anything online. They'd be contacted soon. They never were. Derek couldn't let it go. 2 weeks later, he went back, alone, brought his own camera, tried to find the cabin again. He hiked for 3 days, searched every hollow, every clearing. He never found the cabin. But on the third night, he found something else. Scratches on the trees, fresh ones, deep gouges in the bark, and they formed a trail leading deeper into the forest. Away from any marked trail, Derek followed them, against every instinct screaming at him to turn back. He followed them. The scratches led to a cave, small, dark, barely large enough to crawl through. Derek knelt down, pointed his flashlight inside. The beam caught something, movement, deep in the darkness. And then he heard it, breathing, wet, labored, and a smell like rotting meat and ammonia. Derek's hands started shaking. He called out, asked if anyone was there. The breathing stopped. Silence. Then, laughter. Low, guttural, inhuman. Derek ran. He didn't look back, didn't stop running until he reached his car. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. 2 months later, Derek received a package. No return address, no postage, just his name and address written in crude, shaky handwriting. Inside was a memory card. He recognized it immediately. It was the one the Rangers had confiscated. His hands trembled as he plugged it into his computer. The footage was all there. The cabin, the bones, the figure in the rafters, their escape. But at the very end, there was new footage. Footage he didn't record. The camera was on the ground, pointing up at the sky, and slowly, figures entered the frame. Dozens of them, surrounding the camera, staring down at it. Pale, naked, motionless. Men, women, children, all of them filthy, all of them silent. And then one of them picked up the camera, brought it close to their face. It was a child, maybe 10 years old. Hair wild and tangled, eyes completely vacant. And it smiled. A wide, unnatural smile. Then it whispered something. One word. Derek had to play it back 5 times to understand it. The child whispered his name. Derek. The footage cut to black. Derek moved, changed his name, deleted everything related to that trip. He won't talk about it, won't acknowledge it. But he still has the memory card, hidden, because he knows if he destroys it, they'll know. And they'll come for him, because they know his name. They know where he lived. And in those mountains, they're always watching. Have you ever seen something in the woods you couldn't explain? Something that made you question reality? Drop a comment below. The 4th encounter is different, quieter, but somehow more unsettling. Because it suggests these feral people aren't just surviving. They're watching us, studying us, learning from us. Spring of 2021. A woman named Sarah Chen was solo backpacking through the Blue Ridge Mountains. She'd been hiking for 4 days, following the Appalachian Trail before branching off to explore some side trails. On the 4th night, she set up camp on a ridge overlooking a valley. Beautiful view, peaceful. She made a fire, cooked dinner, settled into her sleeping bag. The stars were incredible. She felt at peace, connected to nature. That peace wouldn't last. Around midnight, Sarah woke up. Something felt wrong. That primal instinct that tells you you're not alone. She opened her eyes, and her heart stopped. There was someone sitting across from her, on the other side of the dying fire. An old man, or what looked like an old man. His face was gaunt, sunken, his skin pale and covered in grime. His hair was long, down past his shoulders, matted with mud and leaves. He was naked, except for what looked like animal hide wrapped around his waist, and he was staring at her, not blinking, not moving, just staring. Sarah didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't make a sound. The man's eyes reflected the firelight, like an animal's eyes. He sat completely still for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, slowly, he reached toward the fire. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. His hand moved into the coals, into the hot embers, and he picked up a piece of half-burned wood, charred, still smoking. He brought it to his mouth and bit down. The sound of teeth scraping against charcoal made Sarah's stomach turn. The man chewed, his jaw working mechanically. Then he swallowed, his throat bobbing. His eyes never left Sarah's face, never blinked. He reached into the fire again, grabbed another piece, ate it. The skin on his fingers was blackened, scarred, calloused beyond recognition. He didn't seem to feel pain, didn't react to the heat. He just ate, piece after piece, 5 pieces of charred wood, each one consumed slowly, deliberately. Then he stood, Sarah's entire body tensed, ready to run, but the man didn't approach. He just stood there, staring down at her. Then he turned and walked into the darkness. No sound, no footsteps. He just disappeared. Sarah didn't move until the sun came up. She packed her things with shaking hands, hiked straight out, didn't stop until she reached the parking area, drove to the ranger station, reported what she'd seen. The rangers listened, took notes, but they didn't seem surprised. One of the rangers, an older woman named Patricia, pulled Sarah aside. She told her she'd been working in these mountains for over 30 years, and she'd heard stories about the old man. Dozens of stories, going back decades. Same description, same behavior. Always appearing at campsites at night. Always eating things he shouldn't be able to eat. Charcoal, bark, dirt, insects. One report from 1985 described him killing and eating a rabbit raw. Another from 1994 said he was seen drinking from a stagnant pond. Things that would kill a normal person. But he survived. Patricia showed Sarah a file. Sightings of the old man dating back to 1978. Different witnesses, different years, different locations throughout the Blue Ridge. But always the same man. Same description. He never aged, never changed. Some people think he's a hermit. Someone who lost their mind decades ago and forgot how to be human. But Patricia had a different theory. She thought he was never human. Not in the way we understand it. She thought he was something else. Something that existed before civilization, before language. Something that learned to mimic human form but never quite got it right. Sarah doesn't camp alone anymore. Doesn't go into the mountains at night. But sometimes, when she's home in her apartment, safe and warm, she smells smoke, faint but distinct, like burning wood. And she knows he's still out there, still walking those mountains, still watching. And one day, he might come back, because he knows what she looks like now. He studied her face for over an hour, memorized it. And in those ancient mountains, they never forget. The fifth account comes from someone who's supposed to protect these wild places. A park ranger named Thomas Pruitt. Someone trained to handle dangerous wildlife, extreme weather, medical emergencies. But nothing in his training prepared him for what he encountered in the Nantahala National Forest in August of 2022. Pruitt was working the night shift, routine patrol, checking campsites, making sure everyone was safe. Around 11 p.m., he got a radio call. Campers reported hearing screaming deep in the woods off any established trail. Pruitt drove out to the coordinates, parked his truck, grabbed his flashlight and radio, started hiking into the forest. It was dark. The kind of darkness that feels solid. Oppressive. His radio crackled with static. He called out, announced himself as a park ranger. No response. After about 20 minutes of hiking, he found the campsite, or what was left of it. The tent was shredded, long tears in the fabric, sleeping bags were scattered, ripped open, food containers were torn apart, a cooler was overturned. But there were no campers, no people, no signs of where they'd gone. Pruitt called out, swept his flashlight across the area, and then he saw them in the trees. Dozens of them, maybe more. It was hard to tell in the darkness. They were crouched on branches, clinging to trunks, all of them watching him. They were human-shaped, but wrong. Too thin, too pale. Their limbs seemed too long, bent at angles that shouldn't be possible. And they were completely silent, not moving, just watching, breathing in unison, a low, rhythmic hiss. Pruitt's hand went to his sidearm, but he didn't draw it, because he knew instinctively that if he made any aggressive move, they would attack. And there were too many of them. One of them dropped from a branch, landed in a crouch, tilted its head, studying him. Pruitt took a step back, slowly, kept his flashlight trained on them. The figure took a step forward, then another, and then the others started moving, descending from the trees, moving like a coordinated pack, surrounding him. Pruitt ran. He's not proud of it. He abandoned the campsite, abandoned the search. He just ran. Branches tore at his face, his uniform. He could hear them behind him, moving through the trees, faster than any human should be able to move, keeping pace effortlessly. He made it to his truck, fumbled with his keys, got the door open, locked himself inside, started the engine, and drove. He didn't stop until he reached the main station, burst through the door, out of breath, Terrified, his supervisor asked what happened. Pruitt tried to explain, but the words sounded insane even to his own ears. The supervisor made calls, put together a search team. At dawn, they went back. They found the destroyed campsite, the shredded tent, but no campers, no bodies, no blood. The couple's car was still parked at the trailhead, keys in the ignition, wallets and phones inside, but they were gone, vanished. The search went on for 2 weeks. Volunteers, dogs, helicopters, nothing. It was like the forest had swallowed them whole. The case remains unsolved. The official report listed them as missing, presumed dead. But Pruitt knows better. He requested a transfer after that. Got moved to a different forest, different state. But 3 months later, it happened again. Different location, same figures in the trees, watching, waiting. Pruitt quit soon after. He works in an office now. Hasn't been in the woods since. But he told me something before we ended our conversation. He said that back in the 70s, the National Park Service ran a classified program. They tried to track these feral people, document them, understand what they were. They set up cameras, motion sensors, spent months in the deep wilderness, and they found evidence. Shelters made from branches, crude tools, signs of long-term habitation. But they never captured one, never even got close. And then, in 1979, the program was abruptly shut down. All records sealed. Pruitt's supervisor, who'd been with the Park Service for 40 years, told him the truth. They found something they didn't want the public to know about. Evidence that these weren't just isolated hermits or lost hikers. This was a population, an entire hidden society living in the deepest parts of the Appalachian Mountains, and they'd been there for generations, maybe longer. The final encounter is the most recent, and perhaps the most disturbing, because it suggests these feral people aren't just avoiding us. They're adapting, learning, and possibly multiplying. October 2024. A photographer named Ethan Cole was documenting abandoned structures throughout Appalachia. Old churches, forgotten homesteads, ghost towns. He specialized in urban exploration and had a small but dedicated following on social media. One day, while researching locations, he found references to an old settlement deep in a hollow in West Virginia. No roads led there, no trails. It had been abandoned sometime in the 1920s, forgotten by everyone. Ethan was intrigued. He hiked in. It took him most of a day. The terrain was rough, steep, but eventually he found it. A cluster of old buildings, barely standing, reclaimed by the forest. He started taking photos. The light was perfect. Golden hour. Everything looked ethereal, haunting. Then he found the house, smaller than the others, set back from the main cluster. The door was hanging off its hinges. Windows were empty black holes. He went inside. The interior was dark. His camera flash was the only light. There was old furniture, a table, chairs, everything covered in decades of dust and decay. But in the corner, something that made his blood run cold. A nest made from leaves, moss, fabric, and hair. Human hair, lots of it, different colors, different lengths, woven together. And in the center of the nest, a child. At first, Ethan thought it was a doll or a mannequin, but then it moved, turned its head, looked directly at him. It was real, a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, completely naked, covered in filth, hair wild and matted, its eyes were wide, unblinking, feral. When Ethan stepped closer, it hissed. Actually hissed like an animal, bared its teeth. They were filed down to points. Ethan raised his camera, took a photo. The flash went off. The child shrieked, a high-pitched, inhuman sound that echoed through the hollow. It scrambled out of the nest, clawed at the walls, and then it ran out the door into the forest. Ethan stood there, frozen, his heart pounding. What was that? Who was that? He looked back at the nest. There were bones in it, small bones, and pieces of fabric. A torn shirt, a shoe, things that belonged to other people, other victims. Ethan ran. He didn't stop to take more photos, didn't explore the other buildings. He just ran. Back through the forest, tripping, falling, getting back up. Behind him, he could hear screaming. That same high-pitched shriek, but multiplied, like dozens of voices echoing through the trees, calling to each other. He made it back to his car, drove to the nearest town, called the police, showed them the photo on his camera. They contacted the state police. A team was dispatched. They found the settlement, found the house, found the nest, but no child, no bones, nothing. The nest had been destroyed, scattered, like someone had deliberately cleaned up, removed all evidence. But they did find tracks, dozens of barefoot prints, leading away from the settlement, deep into the wilderness. They followed them for miles until the tracks split up, going in different directions. And eventually, they just faded away, lost in the endless forest. Ethan still has the photo. He's never posted it publicly, never shared it online. But he's described it to a few people. The child's eyes, empty, hollow, like there was nothing human left inside. Just instinct, just survival. He doesn't do urban exploration anymore. Doesn't go into the mountains. Because he knows now, those abandoned places, they're not really abandoned. Something lives there. Something that was once human. And maybe something that never was. But here's the part that truly haunts him. A week after the incident, Ethan was going through his photos, organizing them, deleting the ones that didn't turn out. And he found something. Photos he didn't take, dozens of them, mixed in with his own. They were taken after he left. Inside the house, close-ups of the nest, of the walls, of the door. And in every single photo, in the background, barely visible in the shadows, figures, watching, standing in corners, hiding in doorways, pale, silent, staring directly at the camera. Ethan deleted them all, formatted his memory card, but sometimes, late at night, when he opens his camera, they're back, just one or two, hidden among his recent photos, watching, waiting, reminding him that they know where he lives, that they followed him home, and that one day they might come for him. The Appalachian Mountains are ancient, 300 million years old, among the oldest mountain ranges on Earth. They've seen civilizations rise and fall. They've outlasted everything, and in their deep hollows, in the places where no light reaches, where no trails go, things survive. Things that learn to live without civilization, without language, without humanity. The rangers know, the locals know, but they don't talk about it, because if they did, people might stop coming. And these mountains have always needed people. Not for tourism, not for revenue, but for something else, something darker. Because every year, people go missing. Hikers, campers, hunters. Some are found, most aren't. Their disappearances are blamed on exposure, on getting lost, on wild animals. But the truth is written in the reports no one reads. in the testimonies that get buried, in the photos that get confiscated. There are people in those mountains. People who forgot how to speak, how to cook food, how to wear clothes. People who hunt with their hands, who live in caves and abandoned buildings, who watch us from the trees, who mimic our voices, who learn our faces, and who sometimes decide we'd make better prey than observers. Some say they're descendants of settlers who got lost, of hermits who went mad, of children who wandered away and survived. But others think there's something older, something that was always there, living in the darkness, waiting, watching, learning, adapting, and every generation, they get better at it. Better at hiding, better at hunting, better at surviving. If this story left chills running down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe. Because here at Chills from Reality, the fear doesn't end when the video does. It follows you home. It waits in the dark. And sometimes it's already there. Stay safe out there, and if you ever find yourself deep in the Appalachian Mountains, stay on the trails. Don't wander off. Don't follow strange sounds. And if you hear someone calling your name from the darkness, don't answer, because it's not who you think it is. It's never who you think it is. And if you look close enough, you might see them, standing just beyond the tree line, watching, waiting, patient, because they have all the time in the world. And these mountains, they always get what they want. Sweet dreams!